So let's have a quick look at urban change in the UK. That's section A in the exam, where there's questions that can often come up around Bristol and other UK areas you've studied. Smaller based questions. So thinking about the distribution of the UK's population. Okay, so think about this map. Where do most people live? Okay, do we have lots of people living in the south and southeast, for example, London? So the UK's population is unevenly distributed. Majority of people living in the southeast, for example, London, whereas the north of the UK, for example, Scotland, is sparsely populated. So define the term megacity, a very simple question. It's a city with more than 10 million people. We've got another question like define the term urbanization. So you can't just say, oh, it's many people move into the city from the countryside. That's obviously not correct for definition. It is the increase in proportion of people living in towns and cities. This question about why, give two reasons how come urban populations are declining in HICs. So like, how come less people are moving to the cities in HICs? One of the reasons you could say is that actually housing is too expensive. It's cheaper in rural areas. And you could also say that urban areas have a higher rate of crime, which is why many people are leaving kind of cities in HICs. And you could also say that air pollution is much more greater within cities. So there's obviously way more cars and people just want an area that is much more cleaner in air. So let's move on very quickly to, again, more like two markers. Describe the international importance of a city you have studied. So obviously the city we've studied was Bristol. Think about why might Bristol be internationally important? There's loads of things you can say. I'm just gonna have a few. Bristol, remember, has two major ports. Okay, and in terms of major ports, you could easily say that this obviously builds on international relationships. Let's say, for example, with Germany and Japan, where they import over 700,000 cars. We've also got the Bristol University that attracts students from all around the world, let's say including China and India, and that obviously develops that kind of international relationship again. Suggests how international migration has impacted the growth and character of a city in the UK. So think about what that means. How has international migration changed Bristol? In other words, that's what it's asking you. Well, it's changed it in a good way. Okay, you could say bad ways, but we'll look at it as a two marker. You just have to write something basic. Bristol is now more culturally diverse. We've got we've got more Asian and African communities. But what about them? That just gets you a mark. Well, they obviously open up businesses, restaurants. There's now more, we've got a range of food shops, let's say, including Chinese and Indian. Okay. Again, a very similar question, a one marker now. Look at how it could say, state how the cultural mix has improved in the UK. You could easily say, oh, in Bristol, we've got the St. Paul's Carnival. That's improved people's relationships with each other because they're now mixing and integrating with so many different types of people. This music festival, festival brings everyone together and improves the culturalness within a community. So let's have a quick look at opportunities in a UK city. So these could be social, economic, environmental. Let's have a look at this question. This question has asked us, how has employment opportunities been created through urban change in the UK? So I focus on the word employment. That's obviously an economic opportunity. If you look back at your notes and the things that we looked at a few things being set up in the city of Bristol, such as high-tech companies. Now, what were some of those high-tech companies? We've had HP and Toshiba. Now, that's your knowledge. How would you explain it as an economic opportunity? Well, it created thousands of jobs for locals. Now, how you'd explain it a bit further is that many of these jobs are highly paid and they employ highly qualified candidates, okay? And you could also make the link, obviously, how therefore there would be an increase in, let's say, taxes as more people are earning. You could also talk about how actually many centres have set up, like finance services have set up in Bristol. We also had the DPA that employs over 10,000 people. Another question is a bit different, but it's an opportunity, but it is linked with public transport. So this is more environmental, but it's asking you, how has public transport been improved in a city? in the UK. So in Bristol, remember they had an integrated transport system, an ITS system. Now, what is that? It allows Bristol to be connected more easily with the bus being linked with, let's say, the rail services. Now, you can see easily why that's important, allowing the area to be more accessible, reducing congestion. That will obviously improve economic areas such as trading and deliveries. You can also talk about the park and ride system being available. Do pause it now and then if you want to make quick notes. Obviously, don't copy these whole things. I will send these PowerPoints over. So, regeneration in the UK. Now, what did we look at for regeneration? We didn't focus on Bristol, we looked at Stratford, which is very close to home. Having a look at this question, how has regeneration reduced urban problems? So, you can't just talk about all the good things about what they did. You have to make a link and say, actually, this reduced this problem and that problem. So, I start off with the East Village. Remember, the East Village was that they improved housing within this area. They built hundreds of new homes, especially with this village as an example, the East Village. These homes were what? They were much better because they had much more space. They were new builds. They were better insulated. And they were, most importantly, they were affordable for local residents. But look at this red part. This red part shows how I addressed this question. How has it reduced the problems? Well, actually, many of the people within this area are on lower incomes. Okay, so it's helped people that can't afford expensive housing and rents. And it reduced this problem because also you could say that there was a shortage of affordable homes. What else did they do? They also, you could talk about the Chobham Academy. You can say it's improved education within the area, where often education pass rates were quite low within this area of Newham. You could talk about an economic point. So the first one was social. Economically, what did they do? They created a massive shopping centre. And what did that do? That created obviously thousands of jobs for many locals. You could say this red part, oh, this problem was that actually unemployment rates were pretty high within the area, but this shopping centre under regeneration has allowed locals to earn an income, which again, you can talk about the multiplier effect, improving let's say the taxes within the area, which can improve other services. You could also talk about, you know, an environmental aspect, which was that, you know, they created a huge green space area of the Olympic Park. What specifically? They planted thousands of new trees, they cleaned up the river, increasing wildlife and creating habitats within the area. And you could say that actually many of this area actually lacked green spaces and recreational spaces for people, and that's obviously improved the quality of life. If you were to criticize it in case, let's say it's a 6 or a 9 marker, you could also say, however, there were many disadvantages. The local area, many people were still very poor and couldn't afford, let's say, the rents on many of these homes. And many people still had to wait on the housing ladder. You could talk about actually the creation of, let's say, these, let's say the Olympic Park meant that many of the original wildlife was lost. Okay, so thinking about challenges within a UK city. So I'm not doing every single challenge, just doing a few. So thinking about social and economic inequality. So something to do with people and economic reasons. So in Bristol, remember we had an area called Philwood. Now within Philwood, there was a huge gap between the rich and the poor within this area. So we've got high levels of crime rate within this area. Again, that could make an area feel very unsafe. And again, you can also kind of link it back to the idea that actually many people may lack qualifications or they lack jobs, which is why they're committing these crimes, or there's a lack of funding within this area. Many of the homes within the area are poorly insulated. The design of these homes were quite poor. They were built during the wartime. Again, this affects people's kind of, let's say, general health. You could also talk about the high unemployment rates and the lack of economic activity within this area, and actually many schools within this area also have a very poor pass rate. Environmental challenges. Now, thinking about environmental challenges within a UK city, there's loads. I've just picked a few. Thinking about this area called Stokes Croft. Remember, many of these areas were once used for massive warehouses and industrial buildings, but now they're no longer being used. So what's that word again? A lot of these have become derelict. And again, if you have lots of derelict buildings, that's visual pollution, but also it could attract lots of, let's say, squatters who settle within these kind of buildings. We've also got another problem, which is the amount of waste pollution within Bristol, and also air pollution, because many people own cars. But think about the issue of waste pollution and actually why that can be a huge problem for landfill sites. Again, a lot of this stuff can eventually decompose and release lots of, greenhouse gases, and also can contaminate the ground and water sources.